Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. And in today's video, I want to tell you how you can turn this massive box into something like this. So Wargaming the English Civil War, or to use its more accurate descriptive title, The Wars of the Three Kingdoms, has been something that I've always wanted to do within historical wargaming. 28mm was always a bit out of the realms for me, just because of the sheer size of the pikes and the issues with transport and the such like. But then with 15mm, it's a big ask to probably spend £300–400 on lots of individual pikemen, musketeers and cavalry as an initial payment. So 3 years ago, when Warlord came out with the newest iteration, the then newest iteration of their epic line, Push of Pike, Epic Pike and Shotte, I was very, very happy and picked it up fairly soon after. So this is mass battles in war-torn 17th century Europe. The image on here is actually showing something from the 30 Years' War. You can absolutely do stuff with the 30 Years' War with this box set. You certainly get all the flags for it. It's not a period I know as much about, and it's not something I'm building towards, but the advice I'm going to give is completely usable for the 30 Years' War. Just the little amendment of you're probably going to need to buy some extra cuirassiers. So how do you tackle something with 1,300 soldiers, and what do you get in the box? Don't panic, I'm not about to do an unboxing, because in the box you get your usual rule book, some nice terrain, dice and flags, but the system is really made out of 2 sprues. You also get them in 2 different colours, so you'll get some cavalry and infantry sprues in this buff colour and some in this grey colour. The idea being you can just clip them out, blue tack them, don't glue them onto bases just yet because you need to keep them apart for painting, and then you can get gaming. Now that's something I'll recommend later on in the video, but let's go through the sprues themselves and what you actually get. Starting with the infantry sprue is very simple. 1 sprue gives you 1 unit of Pike and Shotte. So you have all these traditional epic strips. Yes, I know for this period they wouldn't have standed so close together, but this way we can actually get epic out of them. And then you have 10 of these individual pikemen. They will form your front rank. I really recommend blue tacking these down before you paint them. Otherwise, painting them when they're glued down is a right pain. Now, this is pretty simple sprue, 1 unit, 1 sprue. It's really handy, and within the box you get a total of 14 of these sprues, which is more than you're going to need unless you're doing these massive battles. Now, the second sprue, what I like to call the cavalry and artillery sprue, because that's what you get on the sprue. This one is much more mixed with the units. So to start off with, you've got your medium cannon on here and your light cannon here. Now you can see all these cavalry models, but they are all slightly different. So these 2 here are your cuirassiers, much more heavily armoured. And then you also have 3 dragoon models on here as well. So these ones will be, and I'm just trying to search for them as it's been a while. It's this chap here, as you can see, this chap here and this chap here. These 3 are more lightly armoured. They are skirmishers, not necessarily needed for close combat. Now this one here is your general figure. I actually don't use him as a general figure, and I integrate him into the rest of the cavalry units. Now, as we'll get onto later, the way I can build this means that one of these sprues makes 1 cavalry unit as well as everything else. You also do have some infantry on here. You've got some dragoons dismounted, so when they get off their horses and start firing. And then you also have the commanded shot, so slightly better equipped. They've got their firing poles. These are musketeers that are taken ahead of the infantry together with the horse to maximize firepower. You don't get too many of them, but they're not particularly prevalent in battles. They will have a couple of units, but not loads. So within the starter set, you get 6 of these sprues. And as I'll come on to, I think you probably could have done with getting 12 infantry and 8 of these, but you really can't complain with how much you are getting for a set, which currently retails at £147 on the Warlord website. Obviously, some places will sell it for slightly cheaper. And for the amount of sprues you get, you also get a rulebook, a nice MDF house and some walls, and all the flags you need. I think it's a really good deal. So moving on, let's have a look at my painted collection and some tips and tricks about painting your own epic collection. So let's go over everything I've painted in the last 3 years from the Push of Pike set. As you can see, I'm struggling to get it in frame. Two fairly evenly matched forces at the moment. Parliamentarian on your left and Royalist on your right, but it shows actually the variety of units you get. And again, as you go into the painting styles and tips and techniques, that at the kind of 3 foot rule, this is probably about as far away as you'll see them on the Wargames table. It's all about weight of numbers rather than pure individual quality. Anyway, let's delve in a little bit more detail on some painting tips and tricks. So now I have made a bit more space on the table, taking away a lot of the painted units, but in front of me I have the variety of the different units you can build from the Push of Pike starter. And I just wanted to go over some painting tips, not a how-to, but little things I've learned as I've painted the miniatures that's really going to speed up the process. Now, step one, it's a marathon, not a sprint. I've been painting this on and off for 3 years, and I've got to this amount. You could sit and try and bash out the box in 6 months. I think unless you are some super motivated hobbyist, you would really start to not enjoy the task. It would become a bit tiresome and yeah, kind of risk burnout. So I started by thinking, well, I've got so many units to paint. You want to paint in the fastest way possible, and you'd think contrast, wouldn't you? Contrast paints. And this Pike and Shotte unit here is painted mostly with contrast. I don't use contrast for the metals and the wood pikes as well, but you know, overall pretty nice. Now I am a bit of a perfectionist, and I wasn't quite happy with the finish. I felt like these were just a little bit chalky, and then you could see the white coming through, and I wasn't happy with the colour finishes. So I kind of ummed and ahed, and I painted I painted some cavalry as well in the same style. And I think it particularly became apparent in the cavalry. If you look at this chap here on the right, just not really happy with the front of the cavalry models. Don't have the most detail, but I wasn't happy with the way the contrasts were just sitting. And the overall finish was fine at 3 foot, but it was my collection. I decided to change up. So I would recommend block painting for epic scale figures. Now, what is block painting? It's a technique, very classical historicals, goes back a long, long time, very simple. Undercoat black, that's quite important, don't use grey. And then you just paint on in one colour what you want, but leave some gaps. You can see here the little folds in the trousers I haven't painted, and that creates a bit of depth and definition. There doesn't need to be any washes. The only washes I use on these figures is some black on the metal and then a small flesh wash on the flesh parts. Now, the other tip to learn, particularly when painting these Pike units, is you don't need to paint all the details. So as you can see, I paint all the boots brown, even though it's technically a shoe and then a kind of white sock almost. But you don't really see it with the basing style, so it's better just to paint it all brown. Saves a step. Now, the other tip, as you can see, you can't actually see all the way down. I mean, you can a little bit, but these boots aren't painted. And it goes even further than that on some recent ones. I pushed it as far as possible. Take this unit here, and I don't actually paint the lower half of the rear rank at all. I paint the back of them, but you don't need to paint after the 2 figures each side. The middle 6 figures don't need to have their lower half painted at all. And On the ones where you've got 2 strips, the reverse works for the rear rank, that I haven't painted the back of their models at all. And that way it just saves a little bit of you painting unnecessarily. So a couple of other tips that I use for the big Pike and Musket blocks. So the first one is label your bases. I use the AK paint pens for this, just a little P for Parliamentarian, and then which regiment this is. So this is Philip Skippen's Regiment of Foot. It's really handy because there's such a variety of uniforms, as you can call them uniforms, across the period and the wars. It's very hard, considering they're the exact same models, to identify which would be Parliamentarian and which would be Royalist. So by that way, just having it on all of these bases makes it super easy to know which is which. And it does, I just use the flags in the set. I know there's some questions about the full accuracy of them, and the size. I think they're supposed to be a bit bigger, but I don't mind it so much, really. I think you can go in a bit more in depth if you want to. You don't have to. The level of uniformity I've got in these guys is probably even a little bit inaccurate, but I like to scatter in the odds. You've got some grey uniforms in this one, did a change of trouser colour, which helps just kind of vary it up a little bit. Now the other one is with the flags. I've painted the top edges just with a green paint. I think I used contrast actually, just to go around the sides, because these are paper flags. When you glue them together, there'll be this white strip at the top and the side, and just running, doesn't need to be an exact match, but just the same shade down the sides just helps it match in and look like one piece of material rather than 2 flaps that have been stuck together. So that's how I paint the Pike and Musket blocks. Certainly the largest unit, I don't paint one base at a time, I paint a whole unit. It takes a little bit longer, but that way you get a happy finish. So moving on to the cavalry, these are now also painted in the block paint style. So firstly, I'm sure you can see there's 4 figures to a base. Warlord suggests 5, but with 4 figures and buying the extra commander boxes, that means you don't need to use the command figure on the sprue, and you can put him in a cavalry unit, and then suddenly you've got a lovely equation where 1 cavalry and artillery sprue creates, amongst other things, 1 full unit of cavalry. So a bit of variety, but the main thing is these buff coats, which are incredibly common in that period. I still use contrast for horses. I don't really like painting horses, I never have. I don't bother with socks or anything like that. I just put a little bit for the hooves, but use an off-white. So I spray, undercoat these black, paint an off-white the horse, and then use a variety of contrast to get that kind of natural variation. Again, base is labelled. This is Prince Rupert's Regiment of Horse, just to, again, help with the definition between the two. So they're the 2 core units you'll paint a lot of, the cavalry and the infantry. And now we can move on to some of the slightly different units. So here we've got the dragoons mounted. So you'll have a foot version, which is just here. I do 3 to a base here, again, slightly different from Warlord, but this way it's quite clear on the table. Oh, okay, 3 figures, 3 horse figures on a base, they're dragoons, rather than getting them confused with cavalry. They don't quite have the buff coats as much, so they're not as, in the game, they have a lower save, they're a bit more fragile, and these are skirmishers, but very much the same tactic as painting the cavalry. And then you have the dragoons on foot. This is kind of painted traditional 15mm at this point, because there's not strips. You can't really avoid, you have to paint the whole figure, but an element of uniformity. They're very nice figures. I enjoy painting these particularly. Kind of base them in a way that they're not all in a line, so they're kind of skirmishing a little bit, because they wouldn't necessarily fire by line. Fire by rank wasn't as common. I don't think it was actually practiced in this period. It was a technology that came later. And again, the reason I do 5 figures on a base for these is so they don't get confused with the commanded shot. So the same painting techniques that you'd use for the infantry. So the commanded shot here, explained earlier, are those muskets that have been separated and deployed with the horse at the start of the battle. Now these are only 2 bases to a unit compared to the 3 for the Dragoons, but by including a higher number of figures, I've done 8 to a base, then you can see on the battlefield quite clearly, oh, that's commanded shot, oh, these are Dragoons. Just saves that confusion. Again, I've reduced the amount. I think Warlord put 10 on theirs. It just helps you get a little few more units out when you start buying in bulk. I don't think you need 10. It looks pretty busy with 8. I've only painted one of these units. The next one on the list is to paint a parliamentarian version of it. And then the final 2 units are the guns. So we have the light gun here. Now this will be the exact same model for both sides for all of your light guns. So variety is a spice of life when you come to painting it. There wasn't necessarily uniforms for the gunners, so I really just go all out, change up the colour. I tried to use the same overall palette, but just to change up the guns themselves. I block paint the red because a lot of the wood would be painted red. I've also seen references to them being painted kind of light green, I feel grey almost. And then the guns itself on these ones, I've painted them just black because they're very, very dark metal. But for the larger guns, I've done a mix of black and gunmetal for this one, and then a brass, which is a gold and a brown for this one. So, I mean, it's fairly easy to tell the difference on the battlefield between the 2 guns. You can see the size is different and the number of crew. So you'll have 4 crew on the medium-sized guns. In the game, and we'll come on to this when it comes onto the scenarios, less is more when it comes to artillery. A lot of the battles didn't have too much artillery, and this is to help distinguish the period from later kind of black powder era is the volume of artillery. These guns particularly, your medium-sized guns, were very hard to maneuver. The artillery train wouldn't always turn up for battle and be deployed in relatively small numbers. So that's the painting and basing tricks I have for everything in the Push of Pike set. Now this doesn't come in the set, but you can spend a little bit more time if you buy the Generals pack. So this is either the Righteous Royal or the Tyrant, depending on your persuasion, King Charles. And I've put a bit more effort into him, still done the horse by contrast because I hate painting horses, but I put a bit more effort. I've painted the collar of his shirt. His armor is that enameled look, so it's a mix of gunmetal and black. And then I've even highlighted his shoulder pauldrons with some gold. He would have a very elaborate set of armor, being the king and all. But base these on rounds. Again, the whole point being on the battlefield, very easy to tell that they're a general, and it really helps with ease of playing. So before we jump into a couple of gaming tips, I just wanted to say there's actually a couple of things I recommend that you get on top of the Push of Pike set. Now, surely you're thinking, oh, 1,300 soldiers, isn't that everything you need? You've dropped, a considerable amount of money on that set. Well, it is an absolute bargain with how much you get, but there's a few things that I've picked up which have really helped the collection come along, and these are really handy when it comes to gaming. So the first thing, not pictured here, is I'd recommend buying 1 to 2 sets of cavalry in addition. You can either do this, they do a set of cavalry which comes with 3 sprues and flags, or the other one to keep an eye out for is occasionally they'll do sprue sales and the cavalry sprue will come up. You'll need to buy the bases separately then as well. The reason for that is cavalry in the English Civil War, particularly, as I said, I'm not really talking about the 30 Years' War here, was much more prevalent, almost on a 1-to-1 ratio with the infantry, and there were some battles which were solely cavalry. It's the one weakness of the Push of Pike box. I think the ratio is slightly off even. I would have liked it a bit more if you had, say, dropped 2 of the infantry sprues and got 2 more of the cavalry sprues. So I've picked up a total, I think it's 6 more cavalry sprues. That's really helped kind of make sure that once it's all painted, I'll be able to do cavalry only battles, maybe with some dragoons and commanded shot, but doesn't need any pike infantry. I would say that is a bit of a nice to have. You can quite happily get going with what's just in the box, but probably the first thing you're looking at buying. Now, pictured are three groups of things that I've picked up. Now, firstly, and these I really recommend, is buying some separate commanders. I've bought here the Warlord Parliamentarian on my left and the Royalist on my right. I've been through King Charles in the painting guide, but these commanders are really helpful. So firstly, they're just nice figures. They've got a bit of character. I mean, Rupert's fantastic at that. He's got his dog and his hammer, really unique model. But it means that by separating out your commanders, one cavalry sprue equals one cavalry unit, because you won't need to use that plastic commander. Also, outside of maybe Rupert, the king, and then you've got Cromwell over there, some of these commanders look fairly generic. Now, this is the Earl of Essex, but you just kind of can be a parliamentarian commander in armour, really. And then the same again, you've got, I think this is Lord Astley. Oh no, this is Ralph Hopton, got that confused. But again, could just be any sort of English Civil War commander. That helps with the ratios, and again, something a bit different. Now, the other one, which is really convenient, is I'd recommend picking up some casualties. Warlord sell casualties on rounds, which are quite handy. I didn't get a set of them myself. I bought these from Peter Pig. They come in packs of 8, and you get 3 different poses. You get this guy, this cavalryman, and then this musketeer as well. And then what I've done is I've just got a small thin bit of plywood and cut a larger base, and with some milliput, I very clumsily put a bit of a hole here. So in the battle, say my unit's taken 2 casualties, I can just pop the dice in and pop it alongside the unit, so I know it's taken 2 casualties. I'm not really a fan of a lot of markers on a table, so this is a really good way to show casualties in a way that doesn't really take away from the aesthetic as much. But yeah, I've taken Peter Pig here, Warlord absolutely fine. Now, the final extra thing I've picked up, this is more of a nice to have, is I picked up the mortar crews. Mortars were used quite a bit, particularly in sieges, and Warlord do a resin set. It comes with 3 guns and 3 crew, and then this extra gun commander as well, who I've just stuck on the base here. Really nice little models, nice for some sieges, as I've got the Fort MDF terrain set. But definitely pick up some extra cavalry and the commanders, and if you don't like counters like me, then the dead are a good shout as well. I think Warlord also do some horses for your dragoons, and they also do an encampment set. I could possibly look at picking up the encampment set down the line. Not terribly interested in the dragoon horses. I found, because of the basing dragoons and commanded shot differently, I haven't had so much of an issue with that in games. So let's talk about gaming with your epic. You've based them up, maybe painted a couple of units, and you want to get it on the table. Now, I do actually recommend the Pike and Shotte rule set that comes in the book. There are a few others out there, but if you're new to the period, and it just fits really well in that you get a flavour for the type of combat, but in a simple rule set that if you play Black Powder or Hell Caesar, you can get into really quickly. The only house rule I would suggest, and I do this across all of the Warlord Black Powder type systems, is you can't move 3 times and shoot. Represents there being a bit of lack of manoeuvre. So you get all the rules in your usual kind of fairly nice to read Warlord style, few diagrams, and then you also get all of the army building within it as well, which is really good. As you can see, you can actually get the Scots as well. They do separate products for them, the Royalists, as well as each sort of general having a couple of different special rules that you can take, again represented by the commanders you could use. So you can use them, but you don't have to. You can just use them as generic generals. And there are also a few scenarios within the book. Now, the issue with the scenarios is you can't actually, even the smallest one, which is Brentford here, you can't build it from the starter box set. because of that kind of cavalry mismatch issue. The scenarios are okay. I think they're a bit artillery heavy. And as we'll come on to later, I think it's a slightly better way to design scenarios. But a fantastic little book. You're not going to have to go and then spend £25 on an army book. It's got some points costs as well if you prefer kind of point style, which absolutely, I don't know how balanced it was, but it's quite handy. You get a sense of really what is two balanced armies. And the rules as a whole, absolutely you can get something over in a club night, and there's lots of nice history in here as well, around the 30 Years' War and the Wars of the Three Kingdoms, and even some rules around sieges. So kind of everything you need in a quite chunky A5 rulebook. You do get, as a divider in the set, a nice quick reference sheet. Definitely keep that really handy. But overall, really like Pike and Shotte. So Warlord do a English Civil War supplement for Pike and Shotte, and I bought it. It's okay. I think it's looking a little bit dated now. And weirdly, the best scenario book I've found is Nick Limscombe's The English Civil War, an Atlas and Concise History. This is not a wargaming book, but it's an absolute tome. I think I bought this for about £30. But as you can see, you get some fantastic maps in here. Really nice. And this is why I think they're fantastic for scenarios. Really detailed maps of each battle. Gives you an appreciation of the numbers, so you can convert that into ratios of units, whether you want to do a small battle or some larger ones. And it tells you all about the battle in here, and then even where they know which units are which. So that's how I build my scenarios, is through this book, and then kind of do what I think is balanced through there. So certainly a really good pickup. I think it's £50 RRP, but you can pick it up slightly cheaper elsewhere. Really recommend it. Now, with your gaming sorted, the final little book I'd recommend, it's a classic. It's Philip Haythornthwaite's Illustrated Military History of the English Civil War. Now, I'm sure the information is slightly dated and incorrect, but it gives a nice overview. Again, if you're new to the period, and you want lots of nice diagrams, and then there are some colour plates, as we can see here, give you an appreciation of the different clothes that were worn, the different uniforms, equipment, and some of the changes over time as well. This can be picked up pretty cheap on the second-hand market. I think £5 to £10 is a reasonable price for it, and definitely all worth it. Now, there's a couple of online resources I also suggest. The first one being a very British Civil War wiki, which I'll link. It's back up after being down for a period, and it's a really detailed resource of all the different regiments, where they were served, and if we know their coat colours and units and officers within them. So if you want to have a bit of a local angle, really recommend that. And there is a few really good blogs out there. Shout out to the Keep Your Powder Dry blog, who specialises in 17th century warfare, and really detailed with the history of each unit and the coat colours as well. But with all of that, I hope I have sufficiently armed you to get your own Pusher Pike box and to get some battles in the 17th century on the tabletop. Thank you very much for listening. Also, shout out, I've just hit 250 subscribers. Thank you very much for, well, enjoying me ramble about the great hobby that's military history and historical wargaming. So with that, it's Wargamer of Kent signing out.